Shalom class, my name is Innocent Mapanda. Today we'd like to do three-figure bearing. So we are going to start with this question number 1. It reads, the bearing of x from y is 126 degrees. Find the bearing of y from x. Right. So the first thing to do, you need to sketch the angle 126 degrees on the diagram. This can be achieved by drawing the compass with 4 cardinal points. And remember, in our previous lesson, I told you that three-figure bearing is measured from the North Pole using a clockwise direction. Right. So, since we start from the North Pole, that's why I placed 0 degrees at the North Pole. And the angles will be increased in a clockwise direction. So from 0, we move to 90 degrees. From 90 degrees, we move to 180. From 180, we move to 270. From 270, we move to 360, where we complete a revolution. Right. So the first thing to do, before you can even find the required bearing, you need to sketch the angle x from y. Right. X from y is good as y to x. Is good as y to x. Right. So our initial point is y. So at the center of the compass, you place your initial point, which is y. Right. Then you touch the north pole of y, so that you measure 126 degrees in a clockwise direction. So I want you to notice that 126 degrees is found in the second segment. Why? Because 126 is between 90 and 180. So when measuring 126, you use an arrow in a clockwise direction. And the arrow is going to be placed in the second quadrant between 90 and 180, where 126 degrees is located. Right. So you then draw a straight line from the heart of the compass, right, to touch this arrow. Right. So at the point, at the end point of this straight line, you denote x, since we are moving from y to x. So this is y, and this is x. And this arc, or this arrow, is representing 126 degrees. Right. So, you have to place a north pole at point x, which would then help you to find the required question. Right. So, we now move on to the question. Find the bearing of y from x. Right. Y from x is good as x to y. So remember, I told you that you need to measure the angle before you calculate the angle. Right. So x to y, it means we have to measure the angle from the north pole of x, moving in a clockwise direction to touch the line connecting x and y. So this reflex angle is the required bearing. Right. So remember, I told you about the theorem of allied angles, or co-interior angles. These are angles which are above the transverse line, and they are on the same side. Allied angles, they add up to 180. So x plus y is equals to 180. So we want to apply this theorem to find the inner angle at point x, which would then lead us to the required bearing. Right. So the inner angle, or the interior angle at point x, is an allied angle with 126 degrees. Right. They add up to 180. So 180 minus 126, you get 54 degrees as the interior angle at point X, right? So this interior angle, the 54 degrees, and the required bearing, they complete what we call a revolution. They add up to 360, right? So therefore, the required answer is calculated as 360 minus 54, which gives you 306 degrees as your final answer, representing the bearing of y from x. I hope you are getting something. So I want you to stay tuned as we move on to question number 2. Shalom class, welcome back to question number 2. Right, the bearing of M from N is 304. Find the bearing of N from M, 2 marks. Right, so the first thing, we need to sketch 304 degrees. Right, so 304 degrees is between 270 and 360. So it is located in the 4th quadrant from the North Pole, right? So you draw your arrow, right? And before you draw the arrow, take note that M from N, M from N is good as N to M, right? So N is our initial point, which is placed at the center or at the heart of the compass, right? So we need to move from the North Pole of M in a clockwise direction and place the arrow in the 4th quadrant between 270 and 360. Why? Because 304 is between 270 and 360. I hope you are following. So after placing this arrow, you then need to draw a straight line from N, from the center, right, to touch the arrow, right? So at the end point of this line, you have to place M. So you put a North Pole on M, right? And do not forget to label that this arrow from the North Pole of N moving in a clockwise direction is representing 304 degrees, right? So we now move on to the question. Find the bearing, right, of N from M. Right, N from M is good as M, right, M to N, right? So M to N, I need to measure the angle from M moving in a clockwise direction to N. So this is M, right? So we move in a clockwise direction to touch the line connecting M and N. And this is the required bearing, right? So for us to calculate this bearing, right, we need to first of all identify this inner angle at point N using the theory of complete revolution, which says that 304 in this angle, they add up to 360, right? So 360 minus 304, it gives you 56. So we have got 56 degrees there, right? And using the theory of allied angles, remember this required angle or this required bearing in 56 are allied angles, angles which are above the transversal line, right? They add up to 180, right? So this angle can be calculated by subtracting 56 from 180. 180 minus 56, you get 124 degrees. So 124 degrees is our final answer, representing the bearing of N from M. Stay tuned as we move on to question number 3. Right, welcome to question number 3. The bearing of P from Q is 140 degrees. Find the bearing of Q from P. So like what I told you before you move on to the required bearing, you need to sketch 140 degrees on the compass. Right. So how do you sketch 140 degrees? You need to understand the meaning of P from Q. Right, P from Q is good as Q to P. So Q is our initial point, hence Q is the one that is placed at the center of the compass. Right, so we want to measure the required angle, right, from Q moving in a clockwise direction to P. Right, so we have to touch the north pole of Q, but before you draw the arrow, you need to identify the location of 140 degrees. 140 degrees is an angle which is above 90 degrees but less than 180 degrees. Therefore, 140 degrees is located in the second quadrant. Right, so I'm going to draw an arrow which I'm going to place in the second quadrant between 90 and 180, where 140 is located. Then I'm going to draw a straight line from the center of the compass touching the arrow. At the end point of this line, I'm going to place a point P, as well as placing the north pole, right, the north pole of P as well. Right, do not forget to label that this arrow is representing 140 degrees, which is the bearing of P from Q. Right, after sketching 140 degrees, right, it now means that you now have the passport, right, to calculate the bearing of the required question. Right, calculate or find the bearing of Q from P. Right, Q from P is good as P to Q. Right, so P to Q, it means I'm going to measure the required bearing from the north pole of P, moving in a clockwise direction to touch the line connecting P and Q. So this red arrow is referring or is representing the required bearing. Right, so for me to calculate this red arrow or this red angle, I need to identify the inner angle at P, which is an allied angle with 140 degrees. Remember, allied angles, they add up to 180 degrees. Right, so 180 minus 140, I'm going to get 40 degrees. So this inner angle at P is representing 40 degrees. Right, so 40 degrees, right, and the reflex and the required bearing, they complete a revolution. They add up to 360 degrees. Therefore, my final answer is 360 minus 40 degrees. It gives you 320 degrees, which is representing the bearing of Q from P, so that you get yourself 2 marks. I hope you are getting me, class. Let's move on to the next question. Stay tuned. are now moving on to question number 4. Right, it reads, the bearing of A from B is 0.75 degrees. Find the bearing of B from A. Right, so the first thing to do is to sketch 0.75 degrees on our compass. And remember, you need to understand that A from B is good as B to A, where B to A is representing 0.75 degrees. Right, so the angle from B to A, or 0.75 degrees, is measured from the North Pole. Right, so it means that B is my initial point, which is placed at the center of the compass. Right, then I'm going to identify the quadrant which contains 0.75 degrees. 0.75 degrees is an angle which is between 0 and 90 degrees. Hence, the arrow must be placed in the first quadrant. It is not allowed to exceed 90 degrees because 75 degrees is less than 90 degrees. Right. So I'm going to draw a straight line from the heart of the compass to touch this arrow. Right. And at the end point of this straight line, I need to denote point A. Remember, we are moving from B to A. This is B and this is A. And whenever you place a point, you have to put a North Pole, because this North Pole would then help us to measure the required angle. Right. So I'm going to place 75 degrees, right, representing A from B. Right. So we now move on to the question. Find the bearing of B from A. B from A is good as A to B. I hope you are following. Right. So I need to measure this angle from the North Pole of A, moving in a clockwise direction to touch the line connecting A and B. This red arrow is the one which is representing the required bearing. Right. So how can we find the required bearing? Do not forget that I taught you about the theorem of allied angles. Right? Or co-interior angles, which are on the same side or above the transverse. They add up to x plus y. They add up to 180 degrees. Right. So this inner angle or this interior angle at point A is an allied angle, right, with the 75 degrees. They add up to 180. Right. So 180 minus 75, 180 minus 75, I get 105. So I'm going to write 105 degrees as the interior angle at point A. Right. To find the required bearing, which is A to B, I then apply the complete revolution concept, which says that angles which formulates a circle, they complete a revolution. They add up to 360 degrees. Right. So 360 degrees minus 105 degrees. Right. 0 minus 5, it can't. So 10 minus 5, you get 1. 6 minus 1. Sorry, 10 minus 5, you get 5. 6 minus 1, you get 5. 3 minus 1, you get 2. So your final answer is 255 degrees, which is representing the bearing of B from A. So you get yourself 2 marks for that. Right. So stay tuned as we move on to question number 5. Shalom class, welcome back to question number 5. Right. The bearing of Boterekwa from Tugwi is 258 degrees. So sometimes the examiners, they might not give you letters like A from B, P from Q. They may use the names of cities or the names of countries. Right. So you must not be terrified if you hear the word Boterekwa and Tugwi. Right. You can represent Poterekwa by a letter B. You can also represent Tugi by a letter T. Right. So it is good as the bearing of B from T is 258. Do not worry about the names of the cities. Right. So 258 is an angle which is between 180 and 270. Right. So remember, B from T is good as T to B, which is representing 258 degrees. B from T is equals to T to B, which is representing 258 degrees. Right. So T is our initial point to be placed at the heart of the compass. Right. I'm going to measure 258 from the north pole of T. Right. Moving in a clockwise direction. Right. Like this. Right. So I need to draw a straight line from T to touch this arrow. And this is representing 258 degrees. And at the end point of this line, I need to denote that this is point B. And as usual, do not forget to place the North Pole. Right. So this, let me use the blue ink, so that the red ink, I will use it to identify the required angle. Yes, like this. So this is 258 degrees, representing Poterekwa from Tugwi. Right. So I now want to identify the required angle. Right. Find the bearing of T from B. T from B is good as B to T. Right. So I measure this angle from the north pole of B, moving in a clockwise direction to touch the line connecting B and T. So this red arrow is representing the required angle for you to get the 2 marks. Right. So how can I find this angle? Right. 360 minus 258. They give me this wall interior angle of T. Right. So 360 minus 258, you get 102. Right. So this angle is 102 using complete revolution. Right. So 102 degrees, and this red arrow, they represent what we call allied angles. Remember, allied angles, they add up to 180 degrees. Right. So to find the required bearing, I need to less 102 from 180 degrees. So 180 minus 102, you get 78. But remember, this is 3-figure bearing. Whenever you produce an answer with 2 digits, do not forget to place a 0. So your final answer is written as 070 degrees, so that it will have 1, 2, 3 digits for it to be called 3-figure bearing. Right, so this is 78, but presented as 078 degrees as your final answer. Right, but if you can notice, right, someone could also have used the concept of Z angles. For example, right, 258 degrees, right, is covering from this point up to this point, right? But remember, right, this same circle from this point up to this point, right, completes a straight line, meaning that the part of the arrow covering from this point up to this point is good as 180 degrees. Right. So someone could have said 250 less 180, you get 78, right? And you put 78 here, then 78 and the required angle, they represent Z angles, right? So that was another approach you could have used to identify your required answer. Right, let us move on to question number 6. Welcome to question number 6. The bearing of town A from town B is 042 degrees. So to represent 042 degrees, you need to understand that town A from town B is good as B to A. Right. So B is our initial point that we need to place at the center of the compass as usual. Right. So we are going to measure our angle from the north pole of B, moving in a clockwise direction. Right. So before you draw the arrow, you need to identify the location of 42 degrees. 42 is an acute angle which is between 0 and 90 degrees. Therefore, the arrow is placed in the first segment. 42 is not allowed to exceed 90 degrees. Right. So after placing the arrow, you draw a straight line, right, from B, touching this arrow. Right. At the end point of this line, this is whereby you place A. Remember, it's B to A. So B is our starting point to A. And do not forget to put a north pole at point A. Right. After that, label that this is 42 degrees. Right. So find the bearing of town B from town A. Town B from town A. Town B from town A is good as A to B. So to measure this angle, we touch the north pole of A, moving in a clockwise direction to touch the line connecting A and B. Right. So this red ink is representing the required bearing. Right. So to find this bearing, you can make use of allied angles or co-interior angles. Right. Why? Because this line BA is good as the transversal line. And this angle and 42 are on the same side. They add up to 100 and what? 180 degrees. So 180 less 42, it gives you 138 degrees. Right. So I'm going to write 138 degrees, which have been calculated using the theory of allied angles. Right. So this required bearing, this red angle, can now be calculated using the concept of complete revolution. As the two angles, they add up to 360. So 360 degrees minus 130 degrees, you get 222 degrees as your final answer. And this is how you work out bearing questions of such kind. I hope you have enjoyed the lesson. So what I'm going to do at the end of this program, I'm going to send you similar questions as part of assignment, right? And for those who have finished, you are free to inbox me in my WhatsApp so that I can mark your paper. God bless you and stay safe.